President Trump hitting the road to roll out a sweeping new tax plan. The president and Republican leaders today will reveal their blueprint to reduce what they say is the heavy drag of federal taxes and get the economy moving again. It's on the heels of healthcare not going so well. Welcome to a brand new hour of America's Newsroom. I'm Shannon Bremen. It's a new day.
It is a new day. Good morning to you. I'm Bill Hemmer. Good morning, everybody. Trillions of dollars on the line aimed at higher economic growth for everyone. House and Senate leaders holding an event to release the unified framework for tax reform. You will see that in about an hour's time as the president goes to Indiana this afternoon to sell it, vowing to create jobs and boost incomes after years of sluggish growth.
We will create millions of new jobs for our people and bring many, many businesses back to our shores. We will become a competitive nation again. We won't see companies leaving our country, firing their people, and going and then selling their product, by the way, back into our country with no tax and no retribution. That will all stop.
Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel is live on Capitol Hill. A very busy spot these days, Mike.
Well, Shannon, no question about that. It is all systems go today on a major promise Republican leaders have made to the American people, a huge legislative priority. We saw House lawmakers leave first thing this morning for a retreat to be held on tax reform. They're being joined by Vice President Mike Pence, and lawmakers are being briefed on this plan. The White House and congressional leaders are rolling out to fix our tax code. Some Democrats push to be part of that retreat. Republican leaders say they're welcome to participate in the process as legislation goes through the process of becoming law. Bottom line, after struggling mightily with health care reform, Republican leaders are eager to turn the page on fixing the tax code.
The Budget Committee will be marking up next week, and we plan to move forward on our next priority, which is reforming the American tax code in a significant way for the first time in 30 years.
President Trump met face-to-face with bipartisan members of the House Ways and Means Committee. That is the committee that handles the tax code in the House of Representatives. The president emphasized making the tax code simple and fair, cutting taxes tremendously, lowering rates for businesses to create more jobs and higher wages, and working to bring back trillions of dollars in wealth from overseas. Top Democrats have spelled out their priorities as well.
We've laid out three principles. No reconciliation. That means do it together, not how you did health care, which didn't end up with a great result.
This is just the starting point of what is expected to be the dominant topic here on Capitol Hill this fall. Shannon?
For us on Capitol Hill, and listen, that man is getting a workout.
Yeah.
Running around, chasing everybody. Things are going to happen. They fall apart. They're back on. Right. Now it's taxes.
ABC has a poll out. I just want to share this with you. 44% oppose the president's tax plan. 48% support it. 28% are undecided. I don't know how they know.
We haven't seen it yet. What plan is there to...
I don't know who you're talking to, but anyway, we'll find out in about an hour's time. Despite the latest hurdle now, President Trump vowing to get health care done, and he is once again calling to get rid of the filibuster rule. Tweeting earlier today, we will have the votes for health care, but not for the reconciliation deadline of Friday, which we need 60. Get rid of filibuster rule, end quote. So that's health care, but today it's all about tax reform, and soon we will find out what is in that plan. Senator Pat Toomey, Republican on the Finance Committee. And sir, good day to you, and we will see where we go now. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Does everyone get a tax cut under your plan? Yes or no?
Almost certainly yes. There is some chance that very high income individuals will not. I hope everyone gets a tax cut. Certainly middle class and working class families definitely will get a tax cut. I hope everyone does.
All right. Corporate rate, 20%?
That's where I hope. And I think we can. And that'll be enormously constructive. By the way, that will help workers because the evidence is very clear. A high corporate tax rate comes in part at the expense of the employees of that company.
You may have just heard Chuck Schumer say they want to have a part in this. Will you involve Democrats or not?
We're going to go through committee. If Senator Schumer changes his mind and decides he does want to work with us after signing a letter pretty much making it clear he did not, then we will welcome his input. But we're going to go through committee, and we're going to get this done one way or another.
Okay, because the president apparently during his meetings at the White House said he wanted to involve Democrats. Were you there for that comment?
I was not at that meeting, but I was at dinner with the president just a week or so ago with 3 other Republican senators and 3 Democratic senators.
Mm-hmm. And they said?
Well, these were the 3 Democratic senators who did not sign the letter, which indicated really not much interest in working with us. So they were probably the right ones to start with. But like I said, it's going to go through the committee. There are Democrats on the committee. If they want to participate, if they want to help constructively, they'll have every opportunity to do so.
Yeah, you're coming off this bruising battle over health care that failed. How can you relay a message to Republican voters that you'll make good on your word this time?
Well, look, the proof will be in the pudding, and it starts next week when the Senate Budget Committee has to produce a budget that allows us to do tax reform. I think we will. That will be a concrete step in the right direction. And the other thing I would point out is there's been an awful lot of work who's gone into, there's a lot of agreement on what the tax code should look like. Unfortunately, we hadn't had that consensus among Republicans on health care.
Yeah,
I think we're much closer on taxes.
But we were told a failure on Obamacare repeal and replace was not an option. And apparently it is an option in the end. Is failure on tax reform an option?
Failure on tax reform is not an option. On Obamacare, look, this is a huge setback. I'm as disappointed as anyone in America that we weren't successful yet, but it's also not over. Right now, we're going to shift to tax reform. I am confident that we've got the momentum, we know where we want to go, and we have a consensus. But it will be difficult, and we've got to do the hard work now of getting it done.
2 more questions. Can Senator McConnell deliver as majority leader?
Look, I think Senator McConnell has done a great job leading this conference. He is going to insist on an open process where every interested member has a chance to weigh in. That is the right approach, and I'm confident that we'll get the job done.
All right, final question here. I asked you a lot of questions. Why don't you go and tell our audience how you would frame what this reform package would look like, especially when you consider so many have talked about generational reform going back to 1986.
Yeah.
If you can, based on your outline, what does it look like, Senator?
So what it looks like for a average working class family in Allentown, Pennsylvania, is a reduction in their tax bill, which is the same as a pay raise. It's going to be a simpler tax form to submit. On the business side, we're going to make American workers and American business able to compete with anyone in the world. America is going to be the best place to invest money, to start a new business, to hire more workers. And that extra growth is going to drive up wages. So I think this is going to be really, really good for everybody, and I'm really looking forward to getting it done.
We'll see what it looks like. Senator, thank you for your time. I know details are dribbling out now. Thank you.
Thanks
Pat
for having
Toomey
me.
out of Pennsylvania. Thank you.
Republican Senator Bob Corker will not seek a 3rd term in 2018. He's faced increased criticism from the far right, including Steve Bannon, who threatened to mount a primary challenge against him. We're going to speak with him a little bit later on about his decision. Senator Corker is our guest coming up a little bit later this hour. President Trump has said he's going to visit Puerto Rico next week to survey the devastation from Hurricane Maria. The governor there says the island is on the verge of a humanitarian crisis. Some lawmakers are calling for an accelerated federal response.
Some of the areas outside of San Juan where there's still no communication and no power, logic tells you there's probably some very critical medical needs that are unmet in those areas. The challenges are extraordinary, and it will take a much more aggressive federal reaction than we would traditionally see in order to kind of turn the corner on some of this.
Joining us now, FEMA Administrator Brock Long. Great to see you this morning.
See you.
All right, I know that you were just in Puerto Rico. Tell us what you saw there.
Basically, right now, we are working to rebuild Puerto Rico's entire ability to reconstitute command and control and essential services in these municipalities. It's highly complex. On top of that, we are going to be working, and the major objective is to stabilize the situation and provide life-sustaining support for numerous days going forward. On top of what's already in place in Puerto Rico, we have mobilized a sustainment force from the Department of Defense, which is going to increase tremendously the number of staff and the capabilities that are coming into Puerto Rico.
Okay, I know that the president has been briefed on what you saw there. He is going to go. What does he need to know about what things are like there on the ground?
Well, right now, I mean, here again, it's highly complex. I mean, not only are we having to, because there's diminished capacity at the local government level, we're basically on the hook for being able to push forward as much as we can to be able to sustain life. That includes opening up the roadways that have been heavily damaged. That's also doing debris clearance. That's establishing emergency communications. We're putting forward hundreds of satellite phones into these communities to establish a baseline level of communication to make sure that we have total situational awareness over the issues. On top of that, we're having to provide security down not only from points of distribution, but also at the fuel stations. So yesterday, we delivered fuel to 200 identified gas stations that Governor Rossello pointed out. We're putting fuel in those areas. We're also providing the security to make sure that the commodities are getting where they need to go and not being diverted or taken en route.
Okay, I want to bring up something brought up by the Wall Street Journal's editorial board. This is the headline: Second-class Puerto Rico, Trump declines to waive the Jones Act for hurricane relief. And this has to do with shipping, waiving some regulations with regard to what ships can come in, what they can bring. Can you explain for folks so they understand what that's about?
So the issue is typically around fuel. When you waive the Jones Act, it means that you can't get enough fuel into, let's just say, Puerto Rico. That's not the issue that we're facing. It's different than what we saw in Florida. We waived the Jones Act in Florida because we didn't have enough fuel in the state to be able to get it in there and distribute it. As we understand the situation now and working with Governor Rossello, the fuel is in Puerto Rico. The problem is distribution. So American carriers have enough fuel capacity to be able to bring into Puerto Rico. But again, the issue is the fuel is there. It's getting it distributed because of the highly damaged infrastructure. It's getting it distributed to where it needs to be: hospitals, gas stations. And the governor has proactively limited it. So when you see people standing in line with gas cans at the moment, he has limited the amount of gas that anybody can get to 10 gallons, so that we're not experiencing a hoarding issue and people getting more gas than what they need. And so it's a highly complex issue. This is different than Florida. And when people are making statements, they need to have full visibility of the entire situation and why we do the things that we're doing.
All right, FEMA Administrator Brock Long, thank you for your time and all your hard work. We know it has been endless for weeks for all those working with you as well. Thank you.
Thank you. We need your support.
Big job ahead. 12 minutes past. Mexico still assessing devastation after the quake a week ago. Thousands in shelters waiting to hear whether or not they have a home that's safe to live in. We'll take you there live. Plus, there's this.
The trends have gone oddly, don't you think, from a time when we had a universal recognition that people should be able to express themselves freely and openly, to a time today where we're drifting back to trying to block people from having their voices heard.
The battle over free speech on campus is on. What the AG plans to do in order to fight what he believes is a growing trend against the First Amendment.
Meanwhile, sweet home Alabama for Roy Moore last night. What his victory means for the future of the Republican Party.
We can make America great. We can support the president. Don't let anybody in the press think that because he supported my opponent that I do not support him and support his agenda. I fought in a war to defend that Constitution. I fought in the courts against liberal judges that have usurped their authority on that Constitution. And I'll fight for you at the United States Senate. I'll fight for the people of this state and of this nation who want to bring our country back to its greatness.
Roy Moore speaking after his win in the Alabama Senate primary runoff last night. His victory over Luther Strange has a lot of people looking ahead to the midterms, wondering if it spells trouble for the GOP. Let's bring in Charlie Hurd, opinion editor for the Washington Times. Good morning, Charlie.
Hey, Shannon.
Okay, let's start with the fact that, every state is so different, but this one is really unique. It's not like Roy Moore showed up in Alabama, didn't know who he was. He was the Chief Justice there. He's been in the middle of huge disputes in Alabama. He's very well known and has a strong evangelical base following him. So how much can we not read into this looking forward to 2018?
Well, I think without a doubt it proves what I think we already knew, which is that this populist fever has not broken. The same energy that drove Donald Trump to victory drove Roy Moore to victory. It's very easy for people in Washington to look at Roy Moore and see some of the dust-ups that he's caused, some of the fights he's had with fellow Republicans in his own state, and think that he's probably not the best team player in Washington. But that's what voters are looking for right now. They like the fact that he gets into these fights. They love the fact that he's been kicked off the Supreme Court twice, the Alabama Supreme Court twice. They love the fact that he has gotten tangled up with the federal government on whether it's the Ten Commandments in his courtroom and all of the other things. People want fighters. They want fighters to come to Washington and disrupt things. And the problem here, I think, is when Republicans fail to learn the lesson. The lesson is things aren't getting done properly. And I think the whole thing would have been a lot different if Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump were down in Alabama saying, look, we've accomplished these 10 things this year. We need Luther Strange so we can continue doing what we're doing. They couldn't do that because they don't have any accomplishments.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely part of the stew, I'm sure, that was cooked together to get us to this result last night. The president tweeting this, though, of course, he was supporting Senator Strange, says, spoke to Roy Moore of Alabama last night for the first time. Sounds like a really great guy who ran a fantastic race. He will help to make America great again. Do you think this seat is in danger at all from the Democratic challenger?
No, I don't think it is, but I think that if it were in a less red state, a less Republican state, that you could get into problems where you have, maybe not the most sellable across party lines candidate winning. But here's the funny thing about this whole race, whole primary down there, is that true, Donald Trump's preferred candidate didn't win, but the fact that Roy Moore won is still kind of a victory for Donald Trump, in that it's a victory for Donald Trump's brand of politics. You couldn't find a candidate running for Senate more in the ilk of Donald Trump than Roy Moore. And so in that way, it's sort of a confirmation of Trump politics.
Really quickly, I want to ask you, do you think this presents a situation for the GOP moving into next year? There's been talk about primarying a lot of existing GOP senators where they're splitting their resources running against each other in the primaries and really damaging each other ahead of the general.
It's a real problem and it's a real threat. But the only solution is to get things done and to change the way Washington is working. And Republicans, I'm afraid, have been a little slow to learn that lesson from Donald Trump's victory last year.
Charlie Hurt, always good to see you.
Thanks, Shannon.
Thanks.
20 minutes past, Houston struggling to clear out what's become an overwhelming amount of hurricane debris. Street after street, and officials say there's enough debris to fill 125 football stadiums. Wow. Try finding a place to put that. Live in Texas on the recovery efforts that still a month later are underway today.
Plus, Tennessee Senator Bob Corker, he is not running for re-election. We'll ask him why and whether Republicans can present a united front on tax reform after coming up short on health care again.
People need relief, and we know this. That's why this framework is going to be focused on helping American families. It's going to be focused on helping the people in the middle. It's going to be focused on helping people get to the middle.
As we continue a focus on Puerto Rico, as I mentioned moments ago, they still need help in Houston. People there facing a major challenge. They have hurricane debris that is unlike anything they have seen before. Casey Stiegel's on that story live in Dallas. And Casey, good morning. What do they do with this debris? Where does it go? How big's the problem?
Bill, it is a massive problem, as you can imagine, and a lot of people trying to figure out how to best handle it. This debris is going to be taken all over the place to landfills and these special debris management sites that have been set up inside the disaster zone. That was done by the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality because while there's this push to get the debris cleared out quickly, groups like the EPA want to make sure it's being done safely because there are hazardous materials that have to be disposed of as well, and it has to be done properly. However, patience is wearing thin in some of those neighborhoods. Residents say not only have they waited forever just for the trash trucks to arrive, once they do, there's a long list of rules apparently the residents have to follow.
The rock and the hard places out there, they've cleaned up this, but they'll only pick up 10 feet, and that's it. Then the homeowner's responsible for getting it pushed out there. How do you do that?
They're also frustrated because a lot of those piles of debris are still soaking wet, and they say that's making it a breeding ground for mosquitoes and potentially other disease.
You can only imagine. Help is on the way. What's coming their way, Casey?
Right. Other cities have sent in reinforcements, sending in extra heavy equipment, garbage trucks, municipalities sending in staff. Austin, San Antonio already in place. And then the city of Dallas will soon deploy some of its workers and trucks to help out. They'll be on the ground for 30 days working. Independent contractors are also going nonstop. We're told heavy equipment like tractors and front end loaders are impossible to buy or rent in the region because demand is just through the roof.
People are flagging us down, referrals. You know, I just did this gentleman right here. The neighbor came out and said, hey, come move my trash. I went down there, the same spot. The neighbor came out, hey, come move my trash. You know, so we're just getting neighbor after neighbor.
The city officials say, unfortunately, only exacerbating the problem. Many of the subcontractors actually left Texas post-Harvey, and they went to Florida to help out with Irma recovery. And Bill, the city officials in Houston trying to get higher wages for those subcontractors to try and lure them back so they can help out here in Texas. Well, yeah, it is.
Thank you, Casey. Casey Stiegel live in Dallas and all that. Shannon.
Well, a new push to protect the First Amendment on college campuses.
We want to call out and talk to college presidents, deans, faculty, trustees to say make sure that you're not discriminating in any way against people's right to speak and or discriminating against them academically or otherwise.
Why Attorney General Jeff Sessions says it is time to step in and make sure universities are not limiting free speech.
Also, there is a new scandal rocking college basketball, and the charges against assistant coaches and outside influencers, and on it goes, including a leading sports apparel maker. This is a network, folks, in the crosshairs. We'll see what they've got soon.
It's being called a far-reaching plan to cut taxes and boost the U.S. economy, rolling out right now on Capitol Hill. Republican lawmakers getting a detailed preview of the framework in a closed retreat ahead of President Trump's big speech this afternoon in Indianapolis on tax reform. The administration says the tax plan is focused on helping middle-class families. Some details leaking early showing the plan would cut taxes for individuals and corporations, simplify the tax system, and nearly double the standard deduction used by most Americans.
Controversial speakers are being blocked. You have the veto by the heckler who threatens to protest and disrupt the speech, so the college may withdraw the speaker's invitation so there won't be a disturbance. These kind of things really threaten the entire educational system.
Okay, Attorney General Jeff Sessions there launching into the legal battle over free speech on college campus, declaring freedom of thought and speech to be under attack. This is a thing now. It's a big issue. Mark Thiessen, columnist for the Washington Post, fellow of the American Enterprise Institute, Fox News contributor, Zat Pitkanis, senior official for the DNC. And gentlemen, good day to both of you. All right, now, the fundamental question to both of you men, Mark, you can start. Have the institutions in America gone too far?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as General Sessions pointed out yesterday, 33% of public universities in this country have speech codes that ban quote-unquote offensive speech. That speech is protected by the First Amendment. First of all, what is offensive speech? It depends on they're not talking about neo-Nazis, they're talking about conservative speech. And they have a First Amendment responsibility to protect that speech. But beyond that, the biggest threat to free speech on campuses today, Bill, is this neo-communist domestic terrorist movement called Antifa, which shows up at these to stop conservative speakers and beat up peaceful protesters. They show up in black ski masks with sticks and clubs and shields that say no hate, and they try to intimidate speakers in not coming. Berkeley, when Ben Shapiro spoke a couple of weeks ago, Berkeley had to spend $600,000 on security for that speech. That's a $600,000 tax on conservative speech. That is enough money to send 44 underprivileged students to Berkeley for a full year.
I think the
tuition.
question
so they shouldn't be allowed to do that.
Let me bring in Zach on this. Have they gone too far? And often the pendulum swings, and perhaps they've gotten a little carried away, Zach.
Look, I think this is one big distraction from the Trump administration, and they're trying to distract their base. I do. I think that they're worried that people are going to realize that the problem in their life is maybe that the Trump administration hasn't got a major piece of legislation passed, maybe that they've been trying to cut people's Medicaid for the last 6 months, and instead they're trying to say, no, the problem in your life is that Ann Coulter can't go and speak to a bunch of rich college brats up in Berkeley, California. Give me a break. If you're looking at the actual insincerity behind this administration, just look at the way that they treated NFL players over the weekend. They said that
a college campus.
The official position. Well, but this is about protecting free speech, and they said the official position of the Trump administration is that NFL players should be fired for expressing their right to free speech, for expressing their right to protest. Or let's look at college campuses. Let's look at conservatives who went wild with anger and crazy and gnashing of teeth when Chelsea Manning was going to go speak at Harvard.
Chelsea
Manning is not someone.
Because she's a traitor.
Chelsea Manning is not someone that I agree with. It's not someone that I agree with.
To be clear, Democrats and Republicans denounced that decision.
Exactly.
Go ahead, Mark. Respond to Zach.
No, so this is, Zach is talking about the Trump administration as this is a distraction. This is a real issue. You have a domestic terrorist movement named Antifa that is showing up. During Trump's inauguration, if you want to bring Trump into this, they showed up in Washington and broke windows, set a limousine on fire, and they're doing this on college campuses, trying to intimidate conservatives from being able to speak. Now, I know Zach doesn't care about that, but it's a real issue. If you're a student who's trying to get educated in this country, that you're living in an environment on a college campus where you could get beaten over the head because you say something that in support of the Trump administration. That's not American. Zach has this great outrage that the NFL players are being criticized for disrespecting the flag, yet he doesn't seem to be concerned with the fact that somebody's getting beaten over the head and bloodied because they're trying to support the Trump administration.
The phrase from the Attorney
so where's
General
your support
was
for free
an echo
speech,
chamber of PC and homogenous thought, a shelter for fragile egos. Zach, go ahead and respond to Mark's claim there.
Look, this is not about whether one is supportive of cracking down on free speech. We should be for free speech for everyone. But my concern is, and what I'm trying to express here, is the hypocrisy from those on the right who are not for free speech for everyone. They're for free speech for their people. They're not for free speech again when the NFL.
$600,000 for security at Berkeley is no way to carry out a speech. Right?
Of course not, but I would also say that it is that if you want to cherry pick examples and blow them up way out of proportion, that it's going to seem like a bigger deal than the fact that the Trump administration has been trying to cut people's Medicaid for the last 6 months. That's more important.
Are Republicans being hypocritical, Mark? Are they cherry picking, as Zach is alleging there?
No, they're not. They're being completely consistent. Look, there is no problem with liberal speech on college campuses. All students get all day long is liberalism, liberalism, liberalism. Conservative groups are trying to bring in a handful of conservative speakers to present an alternative view, and they risk now they have to spend $600,000 in security for someone like Ben Shapiro, who is an anti-Trump Republican. And this is not just cherry picking. This is happening on college campuses across the country. It's a major issue, and I'm just shocked that Ben Shapiro is that Zach is more concerned with some NFL players being criticized for taking a knee and disrespecting the American flag that people fought and died for, than people being beaten over the head.
It's a lot of money for free speech. Gentlemen, thanks to both of you. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks.
Zach and Mark.
Thank you.
The Canyon fire in Southern California is still causing major challenges for fire crews. Just 15% of that fire is contained. Hundreds of evacuated homeowners are becoming very anxious now, waiting on word when they may be able to finally return. Anita Vogel is live in Los Angeles with an update. Good morning, Anita.
Good morning, Shannon. It has been a tough couple of days for folks living in and around Corona near the Canyon fire. That's about an hour or so southeast of Los Angeles. Over the past few days, the blaze has grown to more than 2,000 acres. And now there are more than 1,600 fire personnel battling the fire from the ground and in the air. Mandatory evacuations are in effect for nearly 500 homes in neighborhoods around the fire, particularly the Dominguez Ranch neighborhood. And right now, as you mentioned, there is only containment.
Wind is still doing some pretty crazy things. As you can see, we got a little bit of wind right now. So we're kind of waiting to see what that wind does and just make sure it's safe for the people to come in here and continue their lives.
While no homes have been lost, some have been damaged. It was certainly heartbreaking for some folks. One resident, Kathy Reichert, got a call just 1 hour after evacuating. She came home to find embers from the fire had landed on her roof. She had water damage and most of her ceiling was on the floor, but firefighters were able to act fast and save her home from burning to the ground.
I got a call from a neighbor who said, "Your house is on fire." And I went, "Oh my God," I couldn't believe it. Why our house?
No word yet on how the canyon fire started. Now, typically, fire season in California lasts through September 24th. But officials say with the warm temperatures in the 80s and 90s right now, the season could last well into October. Shannon, back to you.
All right, Anita Vogel, live for us in Los Angeles. Thank you.
After splintering on health care, can Republicans present a united front on tax reform? We're about to find out. Tennessee Senator Bob Corker is our guest live. But first, Speaker Paul Ryan defending his colleagues on the House side.
We have been extremely productive. For the first time since 2004, we passed all of our appropriation bills as a Republican majority. So, yes, we're a little frustrated that the Senate has not acted on a seminal promise.
I want to share this with you. Just into us here at Fox News out of Puerto Rico, the U.S. Navy now releasing this video of sailors and Marines bringing equipment and supplies into Puerto Rico. They're on board the USS Kearsarge, and Geraldo was with them yesterday as well. So these supplies are needed, and the help on behalf of the U.S. military is going to go a long way. Infrastructure, electricity, water, supplies, cell phone service. So here we go, Puerto Rico. More to come on all that here on America's Newsroom.
Too many people are struggling in America today. They pay too much in tax, stuck. They feel anxious. They're living paycheck to paycheck. And we need faster economic growth, and we need a tax code that's built for growth that helps struggling families. People need relief, and we know this.
Republican leaders in the House and Senate getting ready to release what's being described as a unified framework for historic tax reform. It'd be the first major overhaul to the tax code in 3 decades. Let's talk about it with Tennessee Senator Bob Corker, chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And Senator, we have so many things to talk to you about today, not the least of which is your decision not to run for re-election. We'll get to that, but let's start with tax reform here. You know that some of your compatriots on the other side of the aisle there on the Hill immediately began talking about this in terms of tax cuts for the 1% and wealthy GOP donors. Your response?
Yeah, I don't think that's I think people are going to be very surprised by what's laid out, or at least if it's laid out in the form it was to me last week. That's not the way this is going to be built. So I think they're looking to do everything they can to grow the economy, as Speaker Ryan was just mentioning. Obviously, there are people throughout our country that are underemployed. We need to raise productivity, which means we want capital investment in companies so that, again, people can make higher wages. So that's what this is about, and I think people are going to be really surprised that that it's more the middle income and then getting corporate rates down that is going to be the focus here.
Last time there was major overhaul, 1986, it was bipartisan. Will this be a bipartisan moment this time around on tax reform?
I hope so. I know we're going to use reconciliation to do it, it appears, which is a 50-vote issue with the vice president sitting in the chair. But I know that the White House is, in fact, courting Democrats. I know there'll be bipartisan hearings in finance in the Senate and House Ways and Means. So I hope that's what ends up being the case, because those kind of policies are the ones that stand the test of time when both parties embrace them.
Speaker Ryan also expressed some frustration yesterday about the House passing numerous bills that have gone to the Senate to die. What's your response?
I just don't have a response. Look, it's that's been the old, the House, they're able to operate, I don't know how to describe it. I mean, if you got one vote more than the other side, you just ram it through, and you're in the majority, you're able to pass all kind of legislation, which is a nice luxury. In the Senate, it was designed this way. This is the way our founders set it up. The Senate's supposed to be the cooling off place, and as you know, we have a 60-vote threshold here, so it's just a little tougher. We cannot pass just purely partisan bills here unless we're using something like reconciliation, which was attempted in health care and maybe attempted with tax reform. But other bills go through the normal process, and as you know, it's difficult in this environment anyway to reach to reach that 60-vote threshold.
Do I detect a note of weariness or frustration in your voice over that? Is that part of your decision not to return to the Senate?
Look, when I ran, I told people I couldn't imagine serving more than 2 terms. I came up here as a citizen legislator. It's been very tempting to stay, I'll be honest. I'm chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, and I can pick up the phone and talk to almost anybody in the world and have influence over what is happening. And so there was a temptation to stay. But I think for me anyway, the citizen legislator model is the right one. I am in no way frustrated. Yes, I'd love to get something done on tax reform. I wish we had repealed ACA, but I'm able to make so much happen just on the telephone that I'm not frustrated. I'm not weary. I look at what I do every day as a tremendous privilege. Every day when I come to work, I'm thankful to the people of Tennessee for letting me do what I do, and I'm going to continue to be that way for 15 months. And anyone who, quote, acts woe is me, when you're in a position to affect things that affect people throughout our country every day, if you feel that way, you should go home. I'm not going home for that reason. I'm going home because I really felt like 2 terms was the right amount of time.
Okay.